Hi there, welcome to a special evening edition of IndyCar on the 17th of April. I'm Gordon Ross. This morning I was making a political point about blame sharing. The idea that the United Kingdom, through its media, through its BBC and ITV news channels, puts out a narrative which allows the English government to share the blame for the kind of silly things that they do by wrapping us all up in the same Union Jack, so that Scotland becomes part of the blame culture, or part of the United Kingdom. So when they do some bad stuff, that Scotland is somehow dragged along as well for the ride. And most recently this has been done by trying to make out that the NHS in Scotland, which is of course a devolved National Health Service, which has nothing to do with the UK National Health Service, is in some way failing, when the failings are actually something which is happening across the UK. Now, quite apart from all of that sort of thing, a number of people have basically contacted me recently with other ideas which they wanted me to mention on the show. One of them, which is not being talked about at the moment, which I think is very important, is the issue of 5G cell phone network, the new network which will take over from the existing 4G cell network that we all currently use, and that you're actually watching this show using at the moment, because my phone is in a car in an area of Glasgow, and I'm beaming this show via the nearest cell tower to another cell tower, probably to some satellite uplink to you, wherever you happen to be, through a cell phone network or a cable or some other way of getting the signal to you. Now that's all wonderful and good, but that network covers things like mobile phones, tablets and computers, and very little of it is used to control what they call the Internet of Things. The devices in your house, for example, which you could switch on and off, the lights, the central heating, the fridge, freezer, all kinds of things which you can remotely operate or teleoperate from your phone or tablet. Now, all of that takes up what's known as bandwidth, which is the amount of traffic space that there is in the bundles of cables which run under the ground. Now, the rollout of 5G will allow a lot more data to fly through the air between your phone, your tablet, your car, or whatever else you're operating at the time, mobile device. And instead of having, say, one set of commands sent from your phone to somebody else's phone or a computer, your phone and everybody else's phone will be able to send up to 100 messages at the same time using the same device simultaneously. So you're going to see an increase of 100-fold in terms of the amount of traffic that the new system can carry. And that makes things like the Internet of Things a possibility, which sounds wonderful. In theory, it sounds fantastic. But what's wrong with this picture is, and what we're not being told about, is the fact that the radio frequency radiation, and that's the signals which come from the cell towers and connect with the other cell towers locally, so they're beaming information from one cell tower to another. The amount of radiation coming from these radio antennas, because that's what they are, they're basically radars, that is going to increase 100-fold. And the power output of these pieces of equipment is going to ramp up 100 times as well. Now that means there's going to be 100 times as much microwave radiation flying around the urban environment, through you, through me, through our car windows, through animals, through trees, through houses, through everything in fact. And we all know what microwaves do when they come into contact with water molecules. If you put a cup of cold water in your microwave, it will boil within a few minutes. And in fact, microwaves were actually discovered by accident when radar operators during World War II sat their cups of tea on top of the transmitters and discovered that their tea stayed hot for hours. And they realised that it must be the radiation coming from their transmitters. Now, imagine what that kind of transmitter does to animals and trees by artificially heating up the molecules in them. And also there are other types of radiation, gamma radiation and hard radiation, what they call ionizing radiation, which is potentially cancer causing, which can also emanate from transceivers like these. Now, nobody has said exactly what frequencies, what wavelengths, and what bands these new 5G transceivers are going to be using. The guess is that they will use a lot of the existing 4G bandwidth and a lot of other frequencies as well, because what are they called? They're called not off-gem. I'm trying to remember. There's an office which deals with telecommunications, Oftel probably. Anyway, they decide what radio frequencies are allocated to different services, TV stations, radio stations, and so on. But they also decide on what frequencies and wavelengths and all the rest of it can be used for cell phone networks. And cell phones work on very short waves, very tiny microwave transmitters. And these transmit over very short distances very accurately with the large amounts of information. So the problem that we have at the moment is we're all talking about why the Chinese shouldn't be allowed to have their hardware installed to produce this 5G network. But the real problem is that nobody knows quite what all of this extra radiation is going to do to us, to the plants and the trees and the animals nearby. How are they going to be affected by this 100-fold increase in radiation? Nobody knows. But one thing I can tell you, and I have researched this over a number of years, years ago when I was working with wood as a material, I did a lot of research into trees and how they grow. And one of the books I read was by an Austrian forester who worked mostly in Germany and the Rhine Valley in the 1930s. And what he observed during World War II, that was when they put a radar transmitter in a forest or near to trees anywhere at all, the radiation that was coming out of that radar transmitter, which is microwaves, very similar to what comes out of a 5G transmitter, the trees began to warp and twist and became deformed, and they wouldn't grow properly. And he doesn't know why. This was before the end of World War II. But he knew it was something to do with the radio frequency that was coming from the microwave transmitters, the radar transmitters. And he postulated that it was overheating the trees, but it was also altering their DNA or their molecular structure in some way, and it was confusing the tree and it couldn't grow straight. Now imagine what that might do to a child, or an animal, or a plant, or a tree, or a crop, or a human being sitting in a house near to one of these transmitters. We don't really know what's going to happen, and nobody has proposed testing the 5G transmitters in any meaningful way on human beings to see what the long-term effects are. We still actually don't know what the long-term effects are of the 4G transmissions that are flying through my head at the moment from this phone. We still don't know what those are because there's not been any meaningful work published as far as I know. So many people are worried about this, and I think it's time to ask questions about this 5G network. How is it going to be tested? Will the extra microwave radiation be harmful? And if it is harmful, how are they going to control that? Will they scale back 5G? Will they scale back the amount of radio frequency radiation that is going to come from these masts? Nobody at the moment can answer these questions, and nobody seems to want to answer these questions. So that's one thing that's going on at the moment. And the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about tonight is in social media you'll see a lot of comments about The National, the newspaper, which was launched by the same company which runs the Glasgow Herald, and which purports to be the only newspaper which supports an independent Scotland, supports the idea of independence. Except that people are beginning to notice that since it got a new editor recently, that the paper has started to become a lot more negative about the SNP and a lot less positive about the whole idea of independence. It's now beginning to look more like any other newspaper. And the only exception to that are from some of the columnists, and I think most notably Paul Kavanagh, who always manages to write a very good pro-independence column every single day of the week. How he manages to do it, I don't know, but he always manages to make good points and to debunk the myths and to effectively criticise shall we say, the unionist side, if you want to call it that, the side of the British nationalist. I was going on a lot this morning about the fact that the British media is not just biased, it's an instrument of the government. The BBC was created by government to, I guess, during times of war, to give people information that the government wanted the people to have. And that is known as propaganda. The Germans did it in World War II, we did it in World War II, and ever since World War II, the BBC has continued to do it in a slightly more subtle way. But since we had the National, this was, we felt and hoped, a step in the right direction to creating a more balanced, a more neutral, or even just a more positive media, which might view independence with, shall we say, a more balanced viewpoint, a more open-minded viewpoint, if nothing else. Even if it wasn't pro-independence, it wasn't overtly anti-independence, such as newspapers like the Scotsman, the most inappropriately named newspaper in the country. But the issue for me at the moment is a lot of things are starting to happen at the moment which are worrying me. The ramping up of anti-Scottish rhetoric through the BBC, through its misreporting of news, through its omissions, and through its continuous negativity and the continuous chipping away at the perfectly functional Scottish NHS, which is outperforming every other part of the United Kingdom. But this Scotland bad narrative that is constantly being pushed by the media is increasing in intensity. And that tells you probably that the UK is very, very worried at the moment that Scottish people are more than ever wanting to back independence for Scotland, and more than ever changing their minds about having voted no in 2014. The fact that my show is attracting so much in the way of flack whenever I make any kind of announcement or any kind of post online, I get jumped on by a whole bunch of seemingly unrelated people, most of whom, incidentally, I think the worst ones, the trolls that I usually get sort of barracking from, tend to be people who have, for some reason, poppies on their profiles, cap badges of British Army regiments on their profiles, or Royal British Legion on their profiles, or RAF Benevolent Fund on their profiles. They all seem to have some kind of connection with British military, or Ministry of Defence, the Royal Navy, or something like that. Very, very few of them, if any, in fact, seem to come from Scottish people who aren't connected with the Ministry of Defence in any way. Some are maybe connected to oil companies like BP or Shell, but they're actually quite rare, and I don't get very much in the way of criticism from them, because I don't think, to be honest with you, the oil companies wouldn't really care where they actually get their oil from, as long as they get it. And if Scotland were to take over the oil fields tomorrow, then Shell or BP would just deal with the Scottish government instead of the English government. It doesn't really matter to them as long as they're making money. But it seems like the Ministry of Defence is desperately worried about people like me, people like Paul Kavanagh, and others in social media. So we say the Yes movement or the independence movement, because we're constantly getting a barracking from all kinds of trolls. And we can tell they're trolls because they're usually accounts with very vague-looking backgrounds, very short profiles, with generic photographs of somebody's family, somebody's snaps of a dog, you know, somebody's holiday in Marbella, perhaps a Union Jack somewhere in there, maybe some poppies and maybe a cap badge, and no history and no friends, and they've been, you know, they've been posting since this morning, basically. So you can usually spot those. And I think the ones with the cap badges are probably giving themselves away a little bit. They're probably Ministry of Defence, and they're just stirring the pot a little bit. But the fact that all this is now happening is worrying at the moment, because I really don't know quite why it's ramping up now. Something is about to happen. It could be a general election, I think. And the reason I think that is that the European elections that we have now been forced into taking part in by the European Union are going to be deeply, deeply unpopular with the Brexiters. They desperately do not want to have to go through that. So they're going to push like crazy against, well, they're going to push Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn to shake hands and come up with a version of Brexit that everybody can swallow and they can get on with it, because the last thing they want to do is still be here and have to go through the frankly, humiliation of having to elect European members of Parliament for a Parliament they're so desperately trying to leave. I mean, it would be like cloning Farage and trying to put, several hundred UKIPers into the European Union. It would be pathetically pointless. I think the SNP has the chance to win. I think was it 8 seats or something there are in Scotland? I can't remember. It's either 6 or 8. Maybe somebody can correct me. I think it's 6 MEPs we have in Scotland. And we have the chance to ditch people like Coburn, the UKIPper, get him out of there, get the Labour person out of there, maybe get the Tory out of there, and just fill those 6 seats with SNP MEPs, which would annoy the UKIPers and the Brexiters even more. Wouldn't actually get us anywhere because we still need to leave the UK. But it doesn't advance independence a millimetre, unfortunately, doing that. However, a general election might, especially if we make the SNP's success in a general election a part of our mandate. And if we said that if a majority of the seats in the general election were to be won by the SNP, anything, let's say, over 30 seats, then that would be a mandate for independence. And if we're not given a Section 30 order, we will hold an advisory referendum. But at the moment, we still don't know what the SNP is going to do. There is the end of the recess coming up at Easter. I expect the First Minister to update us on her plans for another referendum. Updating us on the plans for a referendum sounds very, very weak and watery, doesn't it? It just sounds so wishy-washy, and I'm sure that it's designed to sound wishy-washy. I think everything is being stalled at the moment. The SNP is temporising, it's treading water, it's trying to stretch the time out a little bit further so that it has time to get all its ducks in a row. At least that's what I'm hoping, and I think that's what we're all hoping. If Nicola decides for some reason not to go ahead with the second referendum, then I think there's going to be trouble, because, to be honest with you, if you go back to the Declaration of Arbroath, let's just for a laugh do that, and you go back to what it says in the Declaration of Arbroath, it says that the people, if somebody was to keep Scotland under the control of the English king, under the control of the English, then we would exert ourselves to remove that leader and replace him or her with a person who was going to protect us from that and was going to fulfil their promises to us. And I can see a lot of people would lose faith in Nicola if she did something like that. I'm not suggesting for a moment that she would do that, but I think there is a very critical moment coming here for the SNP, and it's important that the leader of the SNP, the First Minister, doesn't fumble the catch here, doesn't drop the ball, because there's nothing really to lose now, in my opinion anyway, from acting out the whole process of the referendum, for actually starting it, because Britain is going to be busy with its Brexit for the next few months. No matter what else happens, Brexit is going to rumble on, right? It's just it's like a runaway truck that's gradually going to run out of fuel eventually one day. As it's going round and round and round in circles, eventually it's going to wind down and run out of steam. But right at the moment, it's still going. And the British media, the British politicians, and the English audience for that television situation comedy that Brexit has now become is still there. Right? They're still going to be watching all of that. And if we announce that we're going to have an independence advisory referendum and it's going to happen in September, that's going to set the cat among the pigeons completely. I mean, there will be uproar and pandemonium down in Westminster. If Ian Blackford led the entire SNP group out of Westminster and said, we're not coming back till we're independent, that would be great theatre, and that would probably give everybody a boost. And I think it would boost the numbers as well for the referendum. But at the moment, we're just not seeing anything. And all this agonising waiting is killing everybody. And even our own national newspaper is beginning to go off the boil. It's beginning to start sounding like the Glasgow Herald or the Scotsman. And this we cannot allow to happen. This is what I've been warning about all along. Once you start to lose the momentum, the British methodology for ending any kind of uprising is to cut it a little bit at a time, the death of 1,000 cuts. So gradually they'll infiltrate the newspapers like the National, and they'll gradually turn it against independence, very, very gradually, so you hardly notice it. And gradually, ever so gradually, they will turn the tables. Independence will slowly become something that we don't want, that there'll be other better things they're going to promise you. And gradually we will lose focus, and all of this energy that we built up will dissipate. Now, it's a scary thought, but that's the way the British government works. It works by undermining things from inside. It undermines them by doing what people did the other day when I posted something, which is to call me into question and to try and undermine whatever popularity I might have gained through these broadcasts. By saying, oh, you know, I used to follow you, but now you're talking bollocks. I'm going to leave you, and I advise everybody else to as well. Fine, right? If you're a unionist troll and you start saying things like that, well, bye-bye, I don't really care. I know that the people who still care about independence will stick around. Nobody's going to be bought off that cheaply. So let's just be watchful out there. I can see that we're at a very, very delicate stage just now, and we are vulnerable to attacks from inside our own movement. So be on the lookout for people who are stirring up trouble, who are creating divisions here. I'm trying to push the Scottish Government. I'm not trying to criticise them, but I want to see some action. After this Easter recess is finished, surely to God they are going to come up with something. Surely Nicola is going to say, yes, I'm going to call a referendum. Yes, it's going to be this year. Yes, we're working towards it, and we're going to launch a media campaign any day now. But something, anything, just to say that it's going ahead. None of this wishy-washy, well, we'll talk about it in a few weeks. We'll wait till the fog is cleared. We'll wait till the mists have lifted. We'll wait till the wind has dropped. We'll wait till the rain stops. You know, we'll wait till our kilts are being washed and ironed. We could be waiting forever. It's time that we did something. I can't keep waffling like this much longer. My voice is getting sore, and I'm running out of things to talk about, and I'm sure Paul Kavanagh feels the same way over at the National. So Nicola, please, if you listen to me at all, or if you listen to Paul or any of the rest of us in social media and in the media, please, when we come back from recess, say something positive, give us a date, give us a nugget, something that we can cling to, something that tells us that you are going to do something to get us independence. You haven't been bought off by the British state. You aren't suddenly subsumed into the into the deep state of the Privy Council, and that we actually have got a leader who is going to lead us to independence and not back under the control of Westminster. Anyway, I've got to go. But two things I want you to take from this tonight. Question 5G. Nobody knows what damage it's going to do to us. I know we had this conversation once before when telephone masts started going up, and then suddenly all of that died away and everybody seemed happy with it and nobody asked any questions afterwards. But remember, this radiation's invisible. You don't hear it, you don't feel it, you can't taste it. It's passing through you all the time. It's radiation, that's the nature of it. Ask some questions, see if anybody's come up with any concrete tests to see what damage this 5G network might do to us. If any, might be none, I don't know, but let's find out. And also let's stay alert and watch out for people troublemaking from within our own ranks. We'll always have people who argue with each other, and I don't mean that. What I mean is people who are deliberately trying to undermine the credibility of people in the movement who have been working very hard for years. I'm not talking just about me here. There are lots and lots of other people out there who I'm sure their reputations are going to be tarnished and undermined by somebody as well. And nobody's immune to it. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's got a secret in the past somewhere that they wouldn't like other people to know about. It's not necessarily anything bad. It might just be embarrassing to them. But the point I'm trying to make is I'm always trying to be honest with you. If I am wrong about something, then I rely on my viewers to tell me that, and then I will correct it. And if I need to apologise to somebody, as you know, I'll always apologise to them. I'll not I'll not libel somebody or slander them without any kind of evidence to support my comments. Anyway, that's about it for today. I noticed that Kezia Dugdale lost her appeal today, and in an interesting tweet claimed that she had won it because although her argument against Wings Over Scotland was that he had been homophobic towards her, the judge viewed it as non-homophobic, and in fact said that Stuart had in fact been a proponent of gay power and for people, for gay and lesbians to be more prevalent in the media and in politics in general. So what Kezia Dugdale thinks she has won out of this, I've no idea, but it's the usual sort of Labour version of things where black is white, right is wrong, good is bad. When you view things from the Labour perspective, everything is the opposite way around from reality. It's not so much putting a spin on it, it's more like turning the whole thing around and firing it the other way. It's not so much that you're putting a spin on it to make the story curve, you're making it loop around and come back again in the opposite direction. So Kezia Dugdale, I think she's on to plums here. I'm afraid Stuart Campbell has won this one. He didn't make any homophobic comments. I think he was just observing something, and many of us have observed it over the years. But Kezia cannot take offence to it and then claim to have won when the judges clearly upheld what Stuart Campbell had said was not homophobic. I'll see you all later. Everybody have a good evening, and remember, keep watching the feeds. Look out for trolls inside the movement. Look out for new faces who start making, shall we say, unpleasant comments about people, unfounded comments, but specifically ones that say things like, I used to think this person was a great ugly person, now I think they're a total arsehole. That's the sort of person we're talking about. Unless somebody has gone off their heads and, has done something wildly out of character, then you have to question why somebody would try to undermine their character like that. I'm not perfect, I'm going to make mistakes. Occasionally I'll post stuff which might be in poor taste, and if it is, I'll take it down. Sometimes I'll post something which I think is perfectly reasonable and somebody finds offence in it, and I'll often have to reword it so that there is no ambiguity in it. And that's the trouble with printed words. When you actually say something to somebody, then the implications of it, the inferences and the nuances of it can be read from your voice and your facial expressions. But when you type it out, post it up, sometimes it loses something, and sometimes the words can mean two different things, or they can suggest another meaning. So if I ever do that, then remind me and keep me straight. I don't mind. I'll always take something down if it's offensive. I'll apologise if I've offended anyone. See you all later. Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye bye.